And being a federal district, the laws are a little bit different. But generally, under the Posse Comitatus Act, he's not allowed to use federalized National Guardsmen for regular law enforcement. That's the restriction that he has in a bunch of these other states when he's trying to use the National Guard.
Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle. I'm joined today by Supreme Court reporter Jack Birle. And Jack, Trump administration's obviously had a number of clashes with the courts, but none more recently in bigger sort of fervor in a number of major cities over the federal authorities, particularly the National Guard, being deployed to generally blue cities, Democratic cities. What is the latest in some of these court cases that we've seen on this?
So right now there's 3 challenges really to the National Guard deployments in Los Angeles, Portland, Oregon, and Chicago, Illinois. In Los Angeles, that was the first lawsuit. That was in June. It got stopped temporarily, but then it was allowed to resume. It's been ongoing ever since. An appeals court has pretty much let Trump have those troops out there. And what they're doing is they're defending federal assets and personnel. There's been a lot of unruly protest over immigration enforcement in a lot of these blue cities, and that's why Trump said, I need to send in the troops, and that's what he's done under this law. But there is legal questions over whether he can do that, at least from a lot of these Democratic states. Now, in Portland and Chicago, he tried to deploy those troops a couple weeks ago in September, and both of those have been paused pretty much since he attempted to do them, and still to this day. So those have gotten held up. The Portland one right now is held up in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. The full court has agreed to hear the case on that. So it's going to be a couple more weeks probably until we see whether or not he'll be allowed to do it in the interim, or if he's going to have to go to the Supreme Court like he's done with the Chicago one,
right?
Where the district court and the appeals court both rejected Trump from being able to deploy the troops. Now the Supreme Court is being asked on its emergency docket. Tell me if you've heard this one before, Trump going to the emergency docket.
Right.
So that's the first time that we've seen these National Guard deployments go up to the Supreme Court.
Now, in most of these cases, we're talking about not only Democratic-run cities, but Democratic-run states, states with Democratic governors that don't want their National Guard to be federalized and used in this manner.
Yes. So that's what we've seen. Trump has also sent National Guardsmen to Memphis, which is Tennessee.
Right.
That's a blue city, but a red state.
Right.
There hasn't been any pushback there because the governor of Tennessee isn't really wanting to sue Trump over that. He kind of okay with that. But in a lot of these, these lawsuits have been led by the state of California, the state of Oregon, the state of Illinois. Those are the ones who have been suing Trump over these and saying, well, he illegally federalized these state National Guardsmen, set them into federal service, and then unlawfully deployed them, saying that there's not an emergency. And it's really over the power of whether the president has the discretion, like whether there's discretion on if it's an emergency, if he's unable to execute these laws.
Whether the president can decide that it's an emergency.
Yes, and that's what the Trump administration has argued, is that it's the president's discretion on if he can use normal forces or if he needs to bring in these federalized National Guardsmen. But some of these courts have said, well, you haven't really reached that bar. It really isn't that out of control. So that's the question really at the center of this right now.
So in many of these cases, we're talking about the National Guard being used to protect federal assets. It's not quite the same as in D.C., which obviously being the federal district raises different types of constitutional issues, but not necessarily broad anti-crime efforts.
Yeah, so this is mainly so what Trump can do when he sends these National Guardsmen into federal service, he's allowed to protect federal assets and federal personnel. So that would be like federal immigration officers who have been have seen a lot of protests, a lot of pushback, and in some cases some violence against them for carrying out these illegal immigration raids. In the District of Columbia, though, the president's actually the head of the D.C. National Guard.
Right.
So he doesn't have to call them into federal service to use them. And being a federal district, the laws are a little bit different. But generally, under the Posse Comitatus Act, he's not allowed to use federalized National Guardsmen for regular law enforcement. That's the restriction that he has in a bunch of these other states when he's trying to use the National Guard.
So another big exercise of presidential power that's under judicial review, big Supreme Court case coming up, concerns President Trump's tariffs. What are we expecting?
So it's really, we don't know really what to expect on this. This is going to be an interesting case, and it's split a lot of the conservative legal world on whether or not Trump can use IEPA, which is this 1975, I believe, law, that he has said he wanted to tariff these countries with these sweeping, the Liberation Day tariffs, the 10% around the world and the reciprocal rates, and then these tariffs that he levied against Canada, Mexico, and China over fentanyl. Those are the tariffs that are encompassed under these. Some of these other tariffs are not being challenged under the Supreme Court. But so far, the Trump administration has lost in 2 different district courts and in a federal appeals court. And so this is a consolidated case of 2 of those challenges. And it'll be really interesting to see if the court agrees with the Trump administration that he can levy tariffs in an emergency situation like this, or if what the other side is saying, a lot of these businesses are saying, is that no, Congress has the power to tariff, and it's unconstitutional for the president to even be trying to assert this.
Right. How have the courts been affected by the government shutdown?
So the courts right now, they ran out of funding around October, I think it was 17, somewhere around there. So they had a couple weeks of extra funding through some fees and such. But what they've had to do is really go down to kind of skeleton crews on these cases. So the important cases are still going forward, cases where it's like life or death, or just what courts have deemed important cases. The Supreme Court generally is going forward as normal, except for the Supreme Court building is closed right now because of the government shutdown. Right. So access to the courtrooms has been affected. Some of these cases have been halted until Congress passes a spending bill, which we don't know when that's going to happen.
No, we do not.
But the courts are kind of going, kind of not, like a lot of the government right now.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you.
You can read Jack and the rest of our investigation team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.